I did not cry when my daughter-in-law screamed for me to get out of the house. I did not beg when my own son sat there in silence and watched me being treated like a burden inside the home I had secretly paid for. Instead, I walked out with my purse, got into my old car, and quietly shut down every account funding their perfect luxury life. Less than 24 hours later, while they panicked over frozen cards, unpaid bills, and collapsing lies, I was standing on the terrace of my $90 million Carmel Estate, realizing something painful. The people I loved never valued me. They only valued what I provided. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're watching from. And as you watch, don't just sit back. Be part of the experience. If a moment grabs your attention, whether it's powerful, unexpected, or deeply moving, drop a comment with the timestamp of that scene and share your thoughts. Your reactions bring the story to life, and we love seeing which moments resonate with you the most. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and let's begin. My name is Evelyn Mercer, and at 67 years old, I had learned that silence made people dangerously comfortable, especially family. Every morning in Scottsdale began the same way for me. I woke before sunrise, while the house still slept beneath its polished layers of marble, glass, and artificial peace. The desert air carried a strange stillness at 5 a.m, cool and almost tender before the Arizona heat rolled across the valley. I usually stood barefoot beside the kitchen window with my tea, watching pale light spread over the backyard pool Vanessa loved to photograph for social media. That house looked like success from the outside. The infinity pool shimmered like a resort advertisement. The outdoor fireplace glowed every evening beside imported Italian furniture. There were luxury vehicles in the driveway and expensive landscaping surrounding the property like a private oasis hidden from the world. Most people assumed the home belonged to my son, Jason. In reality, nearly every inch of it existed because of me. After my husband Richard died from pancreatic cancer 2 years earlier, I moved into the guest wing of the house. Jason insisted it would help all of us heal together. At the time, I wanted to believe him. Grief makes a woman reach for warmth even when the fire is already dying. Richard had trusted me with everything before he passed. We built our lives together from nothing. While he managed expansion deals and investor relationships, I built Mercer Shield data systems from a tiny cybersecurity consulting office into one of the largest private data storage companies in the Southwest. Years ago, I sold majority ownership for an amount large enough to change generations of lives. Even afterward, I kept substantial investments, commercial properties, and trust accounts quietly operating beneath the surface of my modest lifestyle. I never flaunted money. I drove an older Lincoln sedan. I bought practical clothes. I preferred gardening over country clubs and quiet restaurants over luxury vacations. Wealth had never impressed me nearly as much as character. Unfortunately, character was becoming difficult to find inside my own family. By 6 a.m, I usually prepared breakfast for everyone before the household woke up. Fresh fruit for the children, eggs and coffee for Jason, protein smoothies for Vanessa because she was obsessed with maintaining the perfect online image. Most mornings, nobody thanked me anymore. Plates simply disappeared from the counter as if invisible hands had prepared them during the night. Jason had once been thoughtful. He used to call me every Sunday when he was away at college. He used to ask my advice about business, relationships, and life. Now he looked permanently exhausted, softened by comfort and dulled by routine dependence. He spent his evenings buried in work emails while Vanessa controlled everything else around him. And Vanessa controlled plenty. She corrected the way I folded towels, complained about the scent of my hand lotion, rolled her eyes when I watched old black and white movies in the den. Her cruelty rarely arrived loudly. It lived inside small humiliations repeated daily until they became normal. What neither of them acknowledged was that I still paid the mortgage, the property taxes, the utilities, the private school tuition for my grandchildren, and even the luxury golf memberships they bragged about to friends. Lately, though, I had started noticing cracks beneath the polished surface. Unopened bank envelopes sat hidden beneath stacks of magazines. Credit card balances were climbing faster than Jason's salary could realistically support. Delivery trucks arrived almost daily with designer boxes Vanessa hurried to conceal before anyone asked questions. That morning, I stood quietly beside the sink while Vanessa laughed by the pool during a video recording for her followers. Sunlight bounced off her diamond bracelet while she spoke about gratitude and success to thousands of strangers online. And suddenly I understood something cold and undeniable. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. If you are still watching and already feeling the tension building inside this family, comment number 1 below so I know you are here with me. Trust me, what happens next will completely change the direction of this story. Now let us move on to chapter 2. The house became colder long before anyone touched the thermostat. By the middle of October, I could feel the tension in small places most people would overlook. Vanessa's voice sharpened whenever she spoke to me in front of guests. Jason barely looked up from his phone during dinner anymore. Even the air inside the house felt staged, polished into something artificial and exhausting. I spent most mornings trying to stay invisible. That was the easiest way to survive inside a home where gratitude had quietly died. Vanessa had developed a habit of correcting me constantly. If I folded towels, she refolded them. If I arranged flowers in the dining room, she changed the vase after I left. She criticized the groceries I bought, the television programs I watched, even the way I organized the pantry shelves. None of it sounded openly cruel to outsiders. That was what made it effective. Her disrespect arrived wrapped in polished smiles and fake concern. Jason noticed all of it. He simply chose comfort over confrontation. One Friday evening, Vanessa hosted an elaborate birthday party for my granddaughter Sophia beside the backyard pool. She hired caterers, photographers, and even a live violinist, because apparently children turning 8 now required the atmosphere of a celebrity engagement party. Expensive candles flickered across imported stone tables, while local influencers wandered around filming videos for social media. I spent most of the afternoon carrying trays, arranging flowers, and helping the catering staff manage last-minute details. Nobody asked me to do those things directly. They simply assumed I would. At sunset, the backyard glowed gold beneath hanging lights, while Vanessa floated through the crowd wearing a cream-colored designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Every few minutes, she posed beside the pool with champagne in her hand, carefully curating the image of a perfect Arizona family. I watched quietly from the kitchen doorway. Appearances had become her religion. While carrying extra napkins toward the patio, I overheard Vanessa speaking to another woman near the outdoor fireplace. Her voice dropped lower than usual, tense beneath its practiced elegance. She mentioned credit cards, luxury spending, pressure, something about needing another refinancing approval before the holidays. The other woman laughed nervously and warned her not to let Jason find out how serious things had become. A strange heaviness settled in my stomach. For weeks, I had noticed rising balances inside the household accounts. Designer deliveries appeared almost daily. New jewelry boxes disappeared into Vanessa's closet before Jason came home from work. Twice that month, I found unopened collection notices hidden beneath magazines in the den cabinet. Now the pieces were beginning to connect. Later that evening, while guests gathered beside the cake table, Vanessa wrapped an arm around my shoulder for the first time all night. Her perfume smelled painfully sweet beneath the desert heat. Then she laughed and told the crowd, "Evelyn basically lives in our basement for free, so helping with the party is the least she can do." Several people chuckled awkwardly. Someone looked away. Jason stood only a few feet from us holding a glass of bourbon. He heard every word clearly. For one terrible second, I waited for him to say something. Anything. He remained silent. The humiliation itself did not destroy me. What hurt was the realization that my son had become comfortable watching it happen. Much later that night, after everyone finally left, I sat alone in my bedroom reviewing household accounts on my tablet. Numbers had always told the truth faster than people did, and the numbers were ugly. Unauthorized transfers, escalating balances, luxury purchases hidden inside business expense categories, thousands disappearing quietly every month. I stared at the glowing screen while the house settled into silence around me. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder what would happen if I simply stopped paying for all of them. If you are still watching and starting to realize how deep the disrespect really goes, comment number 2 below. The next chapter is where silence finally turns into something far more dangerous. Let us continue to chapter 3. I barely slept after discovering the hidden transfers. For 3 nights, I sat awake in the dim glow of my bedroom lamp, scrolling through account statements while the rest of the house slept peacefully beneath the illusion of security I had spent years financing. The numbers painted a story uglier than I expected. Thousands of dollars disappearing into luxury retailers, cryptocurrency losses buried beneath fake expense labels, multiple overdue notices connected to cards Jason probably did not even know existed. Vanessa was drowning financially while pretending to float. What surprised me most was not the recklessness, it was the entitlement. At around 4 in the morning on the 3rd night, I found myself remembering something Richard once told me while we were building our company together decades earlier. He believed dependency damaged people slowly, almost invisibly. He used to say that when adults stop carrying their own weight, gratitude eventually transforms into resentment. At the time, I thought love could protect a family from that kind of corrosion. Now I understood how wrong I had been. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning. Arizona sunlight was already pouring through the kitchen windows before 7 o'clock, filling the marble counters with the sharp gold reflections. I stood quietly beside the coffee machine while Jason scrolled through emails on his phone. His tie hung loose around his collar, and dark circles sat beneath his eyes like bruises. Vanessa entered the kitchen carrying tension like static electricity. She slammed her designer handbag onto the counter hard enough to rattle a glass bowl of oranges. Without even greeting anyone, she launched into complaints about rising expenses, unreliable staff, and people who contributed nothing to the household while enjoying luxury around them. The words were aimed at me long before she said my name directly. Then she brought out several papers and dropped them beside my coffee cup. Financial authorization forms, tax restructuring documents, expanded account access agreements disguised as administrative convenience. She wanted control. I studied the paperwork calmly while heat gathered outside beyond the windows. When I refused to sign, her expression changed instantly. The performance disappeared. Vanessa accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, difficult. She said I was making life harder for everyone while living comfortably under their roof. Each sentence grew louder and crueler than the last. Jason remained silent the entire time. That silence cut deeper than her insults ever could. I kept waiting for my son to interrupt, to defend me, to remind his wife that the woman she was humiliating had funded nearly every comfortable thing surrounding them. But Jason lowered his eyes and stared at the kitchen counter instead. Vanessa moved closer until I could smell expensive perfume mixed with anger. Then she mentioned assisted living communities. She spoke about them casually, almost cheerfully, as if discussing vacation resorts instead of places families quietly send inconvenient parents. She told me I should start acting grateful before decisions started getting made for me. Something inside me became very still. Finally, she snapped. "If you don't like living under our rules, then get out." The kitchen fell silent afterward. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. Jason never looked up. I did not cry. I did not defend myself. I simply carried my untouched tea mug to the sink and rinsed it carefully beneath the warm water. My hands remained perfectly steady. For the first time in years, I saw the truth clearly. I had spent a fortune supporting people who secretly resented needing me. Without another word, I picked up my purse and walked through the front door into the dry Scottsdale morning. My older Lincoln sedan waited quietly in the driveway beneath the palms. Inside the car, I sat motionless for several minutes with my tablet resting on my lap. Mortgage payments, utilities, school tuition, property insurance, club memberships, streaming subscriptions, vehicle leases. I funded all of it. And suddenly, I no longer wanted to. With one calm movement, I logged into the primary banking account and revoked Vanessa's secondary credit card access. They thought they had forced an old woman out of the house. They did not yet understand they had just disconnected themselves from the entire system keeping them alive. I drove without any real destination for nearly an hour after leaving the house. The streets of Scottsdale blurred past beneath the harsh Arizona sunlight, while years of memories rose and collapsed inside my mind like waves breaking against stone. Every sacrifice I had made for Jason replayed itself with painful clarity. Tuition payments, business connections, emergency loans disguised as gifts, mortgage rescues after reckless spending. I had spent years protecting my son from consequences because I believed love meant removing obstacles from his path. Now, I understood that I had not raised resilience. I had financed dependence. Eventually, I parked beside a quiet desert overlook north of the city, where the landscape opened wide beneath pale blue sky and endless sand-colored hills. The silence there felt cleaner than the air inside that house had felt in years. For several minutes, I simply sat motionless behind the wheel. Then I opened my tablet. The process itself was surprisingly simple. I suspended the automatic payments connected to the utilities: electricity, water, internet service, pool maintenance, landscaping. I paused the luxury entertainment subscriptions. Vanessa insisted they needed for networking. I canceled 2 household service contracts and removed my financial authorization from multiple shared accounts. Everything had always remained under my ownership or primary approval. Richard had insisted on that structure years earlier. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now his foresight felt almost haunting. I experienced no thrill while shutting everything down, no sense of revenge, only exhaustion, like a woman finally setting down a weight she had carried so long that she forgot how heavy it truly was. My phone began vibrating continuously around noon. Jason first, then Vanessa, then Jason again. I ignored every call. An hour later, a fraud alert notification appeared from one of the premium credit accounts. Vanessa had attempted several luxury purchases at a designer boutique in Phoenix. All declined instantly. I could almost picture the panic spreading across her face. For years, she had moved through life assuming the floor beneath her would always remain solid. She never questioned where the support came from because she assumed it existed naturally, like electricity flowing through walls. People rarely appreciate infrastructure until it fails. That afternoon, I drove to a private storage facility I owned through one of my holding companies on the edge of Paradise Valley. Inside a climate-controlled vault, I began securing the things that actually mattered. Richard's handwritten journals, original trust documents, property records, jewelry inherited from my mother, hard drives containing company archives. I paused longest over Richard's watch, an old silver piece he wore every day for nearly 30 years. Holding it in my hand brought back the sound of his voice with painful clarity. He always believed healthy love required boundaries strong enough to survive pressure. I had mistaken boundaries for coldness after his death. Now I finally understood what he meant. While organizing legal folders, I reviewed the ownership structure attached to the Scottsdale property. The house technically allowed Jason residential occupancy under specific family trust conditions, but ultimate ownership remained entirely mine. Richard had designed safeguards I once considered unnecessary. Suddenly, they felt essential. By evening, my phone contained 14 missed calls and multiple frantic messages. Vanessa had already begun posting dramatic quotes online about betrayal and toxic family members abandoning people during difficult times. The performance no longer affected me. Around sunset, I finally contacted the estate manager at my Carmel by the Sea property. We discussed staffing schedules, maintenance updates, and arrival preparations. His calm professionalism felt like stepping into another life entirely. That night, I checked into a luxury resort suite overlooking downtown Scottsdale. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights beneath the dark desert sky, while silence settled gently around me. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel lonely. It felt expensive. I left Arizona before sunrise the next morning. The city still slept beneath fading darkness, while my car moved west across empty highways lined with pale desert rock and endless open sky. For the first time in years, nobody expected me to cook breakfast, organize schedules, or quietly solve problems before they became visible. The silence inside the car felt unfamiliar at first, almost unsettling. Then slowly, it began to feel like freedom. As miles passed beneath the tires, the desert landscape gradually softened into California hills and distant coastal fog. I watched the scenery change, while pieces of my old life loosened their grip inside my chest. Somewhere between Phoenix and the Pacific Ocean, I realized how much energy I had spent shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. I had hidden my success for so long that eventually even I forgot how powerful I truly was. Few people outside the business world knew the full extent of my holdings anymore. After selling controlling interest in Mercer Shield Data Systems years earlier, I quietly shifted into private investments, commercial real estate, and cybersecurity consulting partnerships. I still sat on several corporate boards under my maiden name. My financial advisors managed assets spread across multiple states. There were buildings carrying my investments that Jason would walk past without ever realizing they belonged to me. And yet, I spent years pretending to be small inside my own family. By the time I reached Carmel by the Sea, the Pacific Ocean stretched beside the cliffs like hammered silver beneath late afternoon light. My estate sat hidden behind stone walls and towering cypress trees, overlooking the coastline. The property had been completed nearly 8 months earlier, though I had only visited twice before. Now it felt like stepping into another version of myself. The house rose directly above the ocean, built from pale stone and glass that reflected the changing color of the sea. Private gardens curved around terraces filled with lavender and white roses. Inside, sunlight poured across wide oak floors and towering windows facing the water. Everything felt calm, intentional, quiet. No tension lived there. No humiliation waited around corners. Meanwhile, back in Scottsdale, the system was beginning to collapse exactly as I knew it would. The landscaping company suspended service first after unpaid balances appeared. Then the pool maintenance contract froze. Several luxury subscriptions attached to my accounts failed within 48 hours. One of Vanessa's premium cards remained permanently disabled, and judging from the growing flood of missed calls on my phone, panic had fully entered the house. Jason finally understood how much of their life depended on me. Vanessa, however, seemed more concerned about appearances than reality. Social media posts continued appearing throughout the day, carefully cropped to hide stress behind filtered photographs and motivational quotes. But desperation was beginning to leak through the cracks. I could almost feel it in the frantic timing of her messages. Oddly enough, I felt no triumph, only grief. There was a time I planned to leave nearly everything to Jason. Richard and I built enough wealth to secure multiple generations, and I once imagined our son carrying that legacy forward with integrity. Now, I question whether large inheritances without emotional maturity simply destroyed families from the inside out. That evening, while unpacking in my study, I received a secure call from a private investigator I hired years earlier for corporate matters. He informed me that irregular attempts had recently occurred on one of my banking profiles involving voice authentication systems. Someone had tried to imitate my voice. Artificial intelligence manipulation was suspected. Vanessa immediately came to mind. I authorized a deeper investigation without hesitation. Later, I stood alone on the ocean terrace holding Richard's old silver watch while sunset spread crimson light across the Pacific. Wind moved through the cypress trees behind me as waves crashed endlessly below the cliffs. Somewhere behind me, an empire built on my silence was collapsing, and for the first time, I was not rushing back to save it. Several days passed before they finally found me. By then, I had already begun settling into the rhythm of Carmel. My mornings belonged to the ocean now, instead of tension-filled kitchens and whispered resentment. I walked the cliffs before sunrise, with a cup of tea warming my hands, while Pacific waves crashed endlessly below the rocks. The estate staff moved quietly through the house with professionalism and dignity. Nobody criticized the way I folded towels. Nobody treated my existence like an inconvenience. Peace felt unfamiliar at first. Then it started feeling necessary. Even so, Arizona continued leaking into my new life through reports, missed calls, and financial alerts. Utility shutoffs had officially processed. The overdue balances attached to the Scottsdale property were multiplying. One account manager discreetly informed me that heated arguments had erupted during several customer service calls connected to Vanessa. Apparently, she was not handling hardship gracefully. The private investigator called again 3 mornings later with information far more disturbing than unpaid bills. His forensic team traced multiple attempts to access my banking systems using manipulated audio samples built from old voicemail recordings and online interviews connected to my company years earlier. Artificial intelligence voice cloning. Vanessa had attempted to imitate me. The investigators also uncovered inquiries regarding refinancing activity connected to the Scottsdale property using partial identity verification under my name. Listening to the details left a cold heaviness inside my chest. Until that moment, part of me still wanted to believe this situation was only emotional dysfunction and financial irresponsibility. Now it smelled criminal. That same morning, estate security informed me 2 unexpected visitors had arrived at the front gate. I already knew who it was before the cameras appeared on the tablet screen. The Pacific sky hung gray and heavy outside, while ocean wind bent the cypress branches along the driveway. Jason stood beside the iron gates, looking exhausted beyond recognition. His face appeared thinner, older somehow, as though stress had hollowed him out in only a few days. Vanessa stood beside him wearing oversized sunglasses and expensive clothes that no longer managed to hide the desperation beneath them. I walked slowly down the stone pathway but stopped several feet from the gate. I never opened it. Vanessa exploded first. She accused me of deception, manipulation, cruelty, and emotional abuse. According to her version of reality, I had hidden my wealth intentionally to control everyone around me. Her voice rose higher with every sentence, while ocean mist drifted through the air between us. Jason remained silent until finally he whispered something that hurt far more than Vanessa's screaming ever could. He admitted they never understood how much I had financially supported their lives. Then he said, if they had known the truth, they would have treated me differently. That sentence stripped away the final illusion I had been clinging to. Their respect depended on my money, not my love, not my sacrifices, not the simple fact that I was his mother. I told Jason quietly that there was once a time I intended to leave nearly everything I owned to him. But wealth placed into the hands of people without integrity eventually becomes poison. Vanessa threatened legal action immediately afterward. I calmly informed her that attempted banking fraud investigations were already underway and that voice authentication irregularities had been formally documented. Jason looked at her with genuine shock for the first time since arriving. In that moment, I think he finally understood the marriage standing beside him might have been built on manipulation from the beginning. I turned away without another word. Behind them, the estate sprinklers activated automatically across the gardens while the cold ocean mist rolled over the cliffs. For years, I begged silently to be treated like family. Now they stood outside my gate, begging to be let back into my life. If you are still watching after that explosive confrontation, comment number 6 below. Because what happens next is not about revenge anymore. It is about consequences, survival, and a painful awakening. Now let us move on to chapter 7. After Jason and Vanessa left my gate, the silence around the estate returned quickly, but something inside me remained unsettled. Jason's words stayed with me for days. If they had known the truth, they would have treated me differently. I repeated that sentence over and over during my morning walks along the Carmel cliffs, trying to decide which part hurt more. The fact that he admitted it so easily, or the realization that somewhere along the way, my son stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as infrastructure. Back in Scottsdale, the collapse accelerated. My attorneys kept me informed while legal paperwork moved quietly through the system. Once the financial protections disappeared, the reality beneath Jason and Vanessa's lifestyle surfaced almost immediately. Hidden credit accounts emerged first, then unpaid balances, then investment losses connected to speculative cryptocurrency trading Vanessa had concealed for months. The numbers were catastrophic. Jason apparently discovered multiple accounts he never even knew existed. According to the investigator, the arguments inside the house had become constant. Vanessa blamed stress, pressure, social expectations, and eventually blamed me for everything entirely. Nothing was ever her responsibility. She barely slept anymore. She spent hours online posting polished photographs beside vague captions about betrayal, toxic relatives, and surviving emotional abuse. But desperation had started leaking through the performance. People noticed. Jason finally did too. Meanwhile, I continued working quietly with attorneys and financial investigators. Richard's trust structure protected nearly everything. Years earlier, he placed the Scottsdale property entirely under my trust ownership, while allowing Jason residential occupancy under very specific conditions. One clause stated clearly that occupancy rights remained valid only while I maintained primary residence status at the property. Now I officially lived in California. That protection no longer existed. I could have sold the house immediately to investors and walked away with a clean profit, but the idea left a bitter taste in my mouth. Too much pain already lived inside those walls. I did not want the house becoming another symbol of greed. Instead, I contacted a nonprofit housing foundation supporting women escaping financial abuse and unstable domestic situations. Their director toured the property quietly 2 weeks later. When she explained how many women waited months for safe transitional housing, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. For the first time since leaving Arizona, something about the future felt meaningful instead of merely defensive. The legal transfer process began shortly afterward. Jason received formal notice requiring the property to be vacated within a fixed timeline. My attorneys handled everything professionally and without cruelty. Still, I knew the notice shattered whatever illusions he still carried about the stability of his life. Because none of it had ever truly belonged to him. Vanessa reacted exactly as expected. She attempted to sell several valuables privately, including artwork and antique pieces purchased years earlier through my accounts. Unfortunately for her, every major item inside the property had already been documented through inventory specialists and ownership records connected to the trust. Nothing disappeared unnoticed. Somewhere beneath all the legal paperwork and financial unraveling, I found myself confronting an uglier truth about my own role in everything. I had spent years rescuing Jason from consequences because I wanted to protect him from struggle after Richard died. Instead, I may have protected him from adulthood itself. That realization hurt more than Vanessa's cruelty ever could. Late one evening, I stood alone overlooking the Pacific while cold wind rolled across the cliffs below the estate. My phone buzzed softly with confirmation that the Scottsdale property transfer had officially finalized. The house that once sheltered entitlement would soon shelter survival. Several weeks after the Scottsdale property officially transferred to the nonprofit foundation, I visited the house one final time. The atmosphere felt completely different the moment I stepped inside. The sharp tension that once filled every hallway had disappeared. Instead, there were children's backpacks near the staircase, soft conversations coming from the kitchen, and tired women cautiously unpacking pieces of their lives into safe spaces. One young mother stood in the backyard holding a toddler while staring at the pool with tears in her eyes, as if she still could not believe stability was real. For the first time in years, the house felt useful instead of performative. That realization brought me more peace than selling it ever could have. Meanwhile, Jason's life had changed beyond recognition. He moved into a small apartment in Monterey County, not far from Carmel. The place was clean but painfully modest compared to the lifestyle he once considered normal. No private pool, no luxury memberships, no designer furniture carefully displayed for social approval, just a quiet apartment with basic kitchen appliances and secondhand shelves. Oddly enough, I think simplicity saved him. According to the property manager overseeing one of my rental buildings nearby, Jason handled his own grocery shopping now. He learned how to budget weekly expenses. He paid bills personally instead of assuming someone else would quietly absorb them behind the scenes. For the first time in his adult life, consequences belonged directly to him. Vanessa, on the other hand, continued spiraling. Most of her social circle disappeared once the money and image collapsed. Several people connected to her online business partnerships quietly distanced themselves after rumors surrounding the financial investigation spread. Even then, she refused accountability. Every problem remained someone else's fault in her mind. Eventually, Jason stopped defending her, not through dramatic confrontation, not through screaming arguments. The separation happened slowly, like someone waking from anesthesia and finally recognizing the room around them clearly. Our own relationship rebuilt itself just as cautiously. At first, Jason only called occasionally. Short conversations, awkward pauses. Neither of us mentioned money anymore. Instead, he asked whether I had slept well or if the ocean air still bothered my arthritis during colder mornings. Small questions. Human questions. One evening, he apologized quietly for everything, not just for the words spoken in Scottsdale, but for years of silence before that. He admitted he ignored warning signs because dependency felt easier than responsibility. Comfort had made him passive. I listened without rushing to rescue him emotionally. Forgiveness, I realized, did not require reopening every old door. It simply required honesty. A few days later, Jason visited Carmel alone for the first time. He arrived by train carrying a small paper bag from a local bakery and a tin of tea from a farmer's market near Monterey. No expensive gifts, no hidden requests attached to the gesture. Just thoughtfulness. We sat together on the terrace overlooking the Pacific while evening sunlight spread across the water in soft gold ribbons. Neither of us spoke much. The silence between us no longer felt hostile or transactional. For the first time in many years, we sat together without debt standing between us. If you are still watching and feeling the emotional weight of everything this family has lost and learned, comment number 8 below. We are now heading into the final part of the story, where truth, healing, and the real ending finally arrive. By early spring, Carmel finally felt like home instead of an escape. My days settled into a rhythm that no longer revolved around fixing other people's chaos. I volunteered twice a week with the housing foundation that now operated out of my former Scottsdale property. Some afternoons, I helped organize legal resources for women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. Other days, I simply listened while exhausted mothers tried to remember what safety felt like. Strangely enough, helping strangers healed parts of me my own family never could. The house itself had transformed completely. The rooms that once held tension, manipulation, and constant performance now carried quiet resilience instead. Children played beside the same pool Vanessa once treated like a social media backdrop. Women cooked together in the kitchen where I used to feel invisible. Pain had not disappeared there. It had simply become useful. Jason's life continued changing too. The transformation was not dramatic or cinematic. It happened slowly through ordinary responsibility. He kept his apartment in Monterey County. He maintained steady work. He attended therapy consistently and stopped treating accountability like punishment. Most importantly, he no longer called me searching for rescue disguised as conversation. For months, every bill in his life belonged entirely to him, and he paid them. The first time he mentioned paying utilities on schedule for several consecutive months, there was genuine pride in his voice. Not arrogance, not entitlement, just quiet satisfaction from carrying his own weight honestly. I found myself feeling proud too, not because he had become successful again, but because he had finally become aware. Vanessa eventually disappeared from our lives, almost completely. The divorce process unfolded privately and without much drama from my side. Her social image collapsed alongside the lifestyle supporting it, and many of the people surrounding her vanished once there was nothing left to gain from proximity. Oddly, I no longer hated her. Hatred requires emotional attachment, and mine had finally burned away. I simply stopped carrying her chaos inside me. One cool evening, Jason visited Carmel again by train. He arrived wearing a simple navy sweater instead of expensive tailored jackets. There was something calmer about him now, less polished, perhaps, but more honest. Together we prepared tea in the kitchen while ocean fog drifted across the cliffs outside the windows. Watching him move quietly around the room, I suddenly remembered Richard standing in the exact same posture decades earlier while making coffee before work. For the first time, I understood something about my husband that grief had hidden from me. Richard never created boundaries because he lacked love. He created them because he understood love without boundaries eventually destroys everyone involved. That realization settled deeply inside me while Jason carried our tea onto the terrace overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The relationship between us felt smaller than it once did, but also cleaner somehow, more truthful. Below the cliffs, waves rolled endlessly against the rocks in steady rhythm beneath fading sunlight. The ocean takes everything that is not anchored deeply enough. In the end, only truth remained. Some mornings, I stand alone on the cliffs outside my Carmel Estate before the sun rises and listen to the ocean breathing beneath me. The Pacific never truly rests. Waves crash against the rocks below with the same steady rhythm, whether someone is grieving, healing, loving, or leaving. There is something comforting about that kind of permanence. After everything that happened, I learned to appreciate things that remain honest. A year ago, I believed my purpose was taking care of everyone around me, no matter the cost. After Richard died, I buried my grief inside usefulness. I paid bills before anyone asked, solved problems before they grew visible, protected Jason from every hard landing life tried to hand him. At the time, I called it love. Now I understand it was also fear. I was afraid that if I stopped giving, I would stop mattering. That became the deepest wound of all. Not the money, not the betrayal, not even Vanessa screaming at me to leave the house I had spent years financing. The true pain came from realizing the people closest to me had slowly begun valuing me only for what I provided instead of who I was. But I also had to face my own responsibility honestly. I trained them to expect rescue. Every time I removed consequences, I weakened boundaries. Every time I stayed silent to keep peace inside the family, resentment quietly grew underneath the surface. Generosity without limits does not always create gratitude. Sometimes it creates entitlement so deep people stop seeing the giver as human. Wealth taught me that money can purchase comfort, privacy, and beautiful ocean views, but it cannot buy character. It cannot force loyalty. It cannot teach respect to people unwilling to learn it themselves. Jason visits often now, not because he needs something, but because he wants to come. There is a difference you feel immediately once dependency disappears. He works hard, pays his bills, lives within his means. The changes in him arrived quietly through consistency rather than promises, and somehow that makes them more believable. Vanessa eventually faded into memory like a storm that finally exhausted itself. I no longer carry anger toward her. She became a lesson instead of a wound. As for me, I finally stopped measuring my worth through sacrifice. I am still a mother, still a widow, still a woman who built a life from nothing alongside the man she loved. But I am no longer willing to disappear so other people can remain comfortable. The morning sun slowly rises across the Pacific now, turning the water silver and gold beneath the cliffs. I once believed love meant giving people everything they asked for. Now I understand real love sometimes begins the moment you finally say no. Sometimes the hardest lesson in life is realizing that love without boundaries can slowly turn into self-destruction. Many people spend years giving everything they have to others, believing sacrifice alone will keep relationships alive. But respect cannot survive where gratitude no longer exists, and peace cannot grow where someone is constantly asked to disappear for the comfort of others. True strength is not found in anger or revenge. It is found in the quiet moment when a person finally remembers their own worth and chooses dignity over approval. Life has a way of revealing who truly values us once the benefits, money, and convenience are gone. And while that truth can be painful, it can also be freeing. Thank you so much for staying until the end of this story. If this message touched your heart in any way, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more emotional and meaningful stories like this one.